我有发现，那你往内拿的更多一点吗？那你倒数你成功爬上来。
We are back talking about stereotypes. This is our last week discussing stereotypes, and I think you will work on your presentation, and then after you have your presentation, I will be back, and then you will present to me what you learned about stereotypes. That's the plan right here. Yes. So this is our last week, and that's what we're going to be doing. So stereotypes. Remember, we said previously that they are based on true behavior. Even though some of the things are true, for some people, it does not apply to everyone in a particular group. So we need to treat people as individuals instead of treating them as a group. So we're going to start off with a review for the statements that are there. You need to it says, is that a stereotype? Everyone agrees? Yes? Okay, so that is a stereotype, and it is not only a stereotype in Asia, it is a stereotype that is found all over the world, and again, it was developed because of the way that they are portrayed on the media, the way that we see them on TV, on the computer, and so the other one, white people are wealthy, means that they are rich. Is that a stereotype or is it not a stereotype? Could you raise your hand if you have an answer? White people are wealthy or they are rich. Is it a stereotype? Yeah, so this is a stereotype. Again, if you remember the video that we saw last week, it portrayed white people as always take the boss, always being in charge. They're the ones who have a lot of money and they are rich, so it is a stereotype. The other one, white burgers and a lot of fried chicken. Is that a lot of burgers, they eat a lot of fried chicken, and they don't cook a lot of meals. Is that a stereotype? Anyone? It's true. It is true, but it is actually just a stereotype. Because the word smart, there's different ways that you can be smart. It's not only with books and being good in school and other subjects. The word smart is a very broad term, so it can mean a lot of different things. But it is a stereotype. And we're going to get back to that particular one in a few minutes. The last one, all Black people are good at sports. Is that a stereotype or is it not a stereotype? All Black people are good at sports. Anyone? Is it a stereotype or is it not a stereotype?
Yeah, it is a stereotype.
Yes, it is a stereotype because they're not all good at sports. A couple of them are, but it doesn't apply to everybody. So what we will be looking at is even though the statements are true and they're positive and they're saying good things about a particular group of people, is it being used in a good way? So we're going to watch this video, then we will discuss what the video is saying.
In 2007, researchers surveyed over 180. Teachers to understand if they had stereotypes about students with 3 racial groups. The results surfaced several negative stereotypes, labeling Black students as aggressive and stubborn, white students as selfish and materialistic, and Asian students as shy and meek. But regardless of the teacher's other biases, the most commonly held opinion was that Asian students were significantly more industrious, intelligent, and gentle than their peers. On the surface, this might seem like a good thing, or at least better than other negative characterizations. But treating this seemingly favorable stereotype as reality can actually cause a surprising amount of harm to those it describes, those it doesn't, and even those who believe it to be true. This image of humble, hardworking Asians is actually well known as the model minority stereotype. Versions of this stereotype emerged in the mid-20th century to describe Chinese Americans. But following World War II, the label became commonly used to claim that Japanese Americans had overcome their mistreatment in US incarceration camps and successfully integrated into American society. Former incarcerees were praised as compliant, diligent, and respectful of authority. In the following decades, model minority became a label for many Asian populations in the US. But the truth behind this story of thriving Asian Americans is much more complicated. During World War II, the US government tried to Americanize incarcerated Japanese Americans. They did this through English language classes, patriotic exercises, and lessons on how to behave in white American society. When incarcerees were released, they were instructed to avoid returning to their own communities and cultural practices, and instead integrate into white society. But after decades of anti-Asian policies and propaganda, white Americans had to be persuaded that Japanese Americans were no longer a threat. So the government organized media coverage to transform the public perception of Japanese Americans from suspected traitors to an American success story. In fact, the phrase model minority was coined by one such article from 1966. But this article, and others like it, didn't just cast Asian Americans as an obedient and respectful model minority. They also criticized so-called problem minorities, primarily Black Americans. Politicians who were threatened by the rising civil rights movement used this rhetoric to discredit Black Americans' demands for justice and equality. They presented a fabricated story of Asian American success to paint struggling Black communities as inferior. This narrative put a wedge between Black and Asian Americans. It erased their shared history of fighting oppression alongside other marginalized groups and pit the two communities against each other. In doing so, the model minority myth also enforced a racial hierarchy, with white Americans on top and everyone else underneath. Certainly, many people who still believe the model minority stereotype, either consciously or unconsciously, might not agree with that idea. But comparing the imagined strengths and weaknesses of racial groups places value on how well those groups meet certain standards, typically standards set by a white majority. In this case, the model minority stereotype suggests that marginalized groups who are compliant, gentle, and respectful of white authority are deserving of tolerance, while groups that challenge the status quo are not. This stereotype also negatively impacts the Asian individuals it describes. According to a psychological phenomenon known as stereotype threat, members of the group often place pressure on their individual actions to avoid encouraging negative group stereotypes. But this phenomenon can occur around seemingly positive stereotypes as well. The pressure associated with living up to impossibly high standards can lead to poor performance, and teachers are less likely to notice when Asian students are struggling. Outside the classroom, social programs catering to Asian communities are frequently overlooked or cut because they're assumed to need less support than other disadvantaged groups. The favorable portrait created by this stereotype can also make it harder to recognize racially motivated violence and discrimination against Asian Americans. And since the stereotype carelessly groups all Asians under the same umbrella, it impacts people with various backgrounds and unique histories of discrimination. So while the model minority label might appear to benefit Asian populations at first, in practice, it works like every other racial stereotype. It reduces a group of people to a one-dimensional image. And that single image hinders our ability to understand the history, struggles, and triumphs of the individuals within the group. Acknowledging and challenging these labels is essential for building coalitions across communities and eliminating harmful stereotypes for good. To learn more about the history of World War II's Japanese American incarceration camps, click on the video on the left.
Okay, so in the video, they were talking about the stereotypes that most people have, or the idea that most people have about Asians. And we discussed Asians being everyone who lives in the continent of Asia. And while the things that they're saying are good things, what happens when you are that one person in the group that those good things do not apply to? It says that Asians are known for being very smart. Even if you are very smart, for instance, you're in a class, there's someone in the class who will get the lowest grade. So what happens then when you are that person and you do not fit what the stereotype is saying? What do you think that person will feel like? Any ideas? What happens when you do not fit into the stereotype that they have associated you with? If Asians are supposed to be smart, what happens when you are Asian and you are not smart? If Asians are supposed to be quiet and shy, what happens when you are Asian and you are not quiet, you are not shy? If they're supposed to be good at math, what happens when you are Asian and you are not good at math? Anyone cares to share what you think happens when you do not fit the stereotype or what they expect?
let their opinions to associate it with more individual opinions.
Okay, so he's saying that it should be more for the individual than as a group. Alright, and that is correct. But has anyone experienced something like that before? When you are expected to be this type of person, but in reality you are not that way at all. You are the complete opposite. Has anyone experienced something like that? So, while the expectations are good and they are actually complementing the people or the group, if you do not fit into that particular category and you are not that person that it applies to, then it doesn't feel so good to be that person. And that is why we should not stereotype people. So the positive stereotypes for each of the racial stereotypes or each of the races, there are racial stereotypes that while it sounds good and it's a compliment and it's positive, when we look at it in the bigger picture, it actually has some negative implications. So saying all black people or saying black people are good at sports. I am black and I am not good at sports. So I am this, even though it's supposed to be positive, for me it's not a compliment because I am not that person. Another stereotype that is supposed to be positive is Asians are good at math. And we explained this, I think, in the first week. But again, it's supposed to be positive, but what happens when you are that person that is not good at math? And the last one, in regards to Caucasians or white people, they're known as being rich, but what happens when you are that white person or the Caucasian in the group that is not rich? So even though it is compliments and it's a good thing, they're not always positive. So those positive stereotypes have negative implications. And when you are not the stereotypical Asian, when you're not the stereotypical black person, or when you are not the stereotypical white person, then it often leads to problems such as anxiety or depression. You start to feel like you are not good enough, and you start to try to do all sorts of things to meet the expectations. So it puts pressure on the people who are not, and again, it just emphasizes the reason why we should not stereotype. Also, racism comes from stereotyping. Even when you are saying positive things and good things, it can lead to racism. So here, for Chinese, we have words or stereotypes that they're smart, they can speak 2 languages. Then we also have that they eat cats and dogs. They all look the same, and they are all bad drivers. So these positive and negative stereotypes, again, it may be true for some, but it is not true for all. And these things, especially the ones where they eat cats and dogs, stereotype, it leads to mockery and it leads to bullying. The one here with black people saying they're good at sports. They have cool hair, but they're not, they're less intelligent. They can't swim, they enjoy rap music, they love chicken, and that their parents are together. The ones that are negative, of course, can lead to bullying and lead to people being mocked. And it goes for each group of people. We have for the Indian and then for the white people as well. So now we're looking at what people think about stereotypes on a whole. So just the opinion that people have on stereotypes.
Hey guys, it's Information Boss. What comes to your mind when you think of China and its people? To some, China still remains very much a mystery. That's why I recently asked you, our Asian Plus community, to give us as many stereotypes you have of Chinese people, and we got an overwhelming response. Well, our Asian Plus reporter Sarah hit the streets of Shanghai to find out how Chinese people feel about these stereotypes. Let's dive in.
您觉得外国人对中国都有哪些印象？
外国人对中国感觉都比较 old school 嘛，就觉得中国人偏传统一点，然后没有那么 open。
还是很神秘，就是说外国人跟中国人好像觉得有沟通还是有一个障碍的问题。
其实呢，下面这些词是我们从得到的反馈里面，对中国印象的一些评论，比如中国游客对不受欢迎、没有礼貌，您同意这些观点吗？
不太同意。
为什么？
因为在上海的感觉还是蛮多人是守规矩。
部分还是同意的。为什么？因为中国非常大嘛，我们有不同线的城市，有1线、2线，可能在2、3线城市，就是随着现在经济越来越好了，那他们才刚刚开始接触，去国外旅游，可能会有一些比较不太文明的现象。
一部分人确实是说话比较大声啊，确实缺少礼貌，或者中国人的习惯。外国人是点对点的沟通方式，中国人是一群人面对面，所以说他必须得声音相对来说会响亮一些。所以说这个声音响亮，他自己就控制不住。
当你听到中国游客不受欢迎时，你会有什么感觉？
第一反应会觉得说比较失望，然后也会觉得说稍微有一点点，就是丢面子吧。
对，作为国人肯定心里是不舒服的，但我只能我不可能要求别人去怎样，我只能做好自己。然后，而且我觉得随着我们国家这个受教育程度普及越来越高，这个问题可能几十年之后就没有了，就解决掉了。
不开心，可以多解释一下为什么不开心？
第一就是也会觉得挺担心的，就是这个就给大家的印象，会觉得怎么国人会做出这样子蛮丢脸的事情。
您觉得为什么会对中国人有这样的印象？
就是在国外，他们已经形成了这种就是排队啊，或者是有这样的秩序感。在国内的话，我们暂时还没有在培养这种意识。
所有的中国人都会功夫，这是真的吗？
这不可能。
为什么不会？你有学过武术吗？
没有学过，但是我会去学。小时候学过一些套路，武术套路，就是一些可以说是花拳绣腿吧，就是没有真正什么一些用处，我感觉啊。
您觉得为什么会有这种印象的存在？
可能外国人看的对小人对有上
有少林寺，或者是各种各样的武侠小说啊，然后影视作品啊，然后就是宣扬中国人的功夫啊，我的印象。
有人评论过很多中国人都吃狗肉，这种说法真实吗？
我是不吃狗的，而且我周围的人也不太多。我只是觉得可能是地域性吧。
我觉得是真实的吧，因为确实在有一些地方是有狗肉火锅这样子，在徐州配县，我知道他们的狗肉是当地很有名的，是他们的特产。
不真实，肯定不真实的。
为什么？
我觉得现在养狗的越来越多了，肯定是我自己个人是非常喜欢这猫，自己家里人也是。
我之前有见过一个大叔吧，他就特别喜欢吃狗肉，就是自己去买狗，自己去弄。但是我觉得不真实。
为什么？
因为狗肉呢是什么时候开始流行？3年自然灾害的时候，因为没有吃，所以才开始吃狗肉的。 那个3年自然灾害的时候，因为没有吃麻雀肉、吃猫肉、吃老鼠肉、吃狗肉算好的了。
你有吃过狗肉吗？
我吃过，我觉得狗肉不好吃，还是牛肉好吃，牛肉好吃。
Chinese people are not good at English. Is it true?
还是不懂啊。
中国人英文都不太好，是真的吗？
这个好。
Is it true?
Yes.
Why?
因为我英文也不好。
No. Why? Because my friends are all very good at English, and everyone study English from very early age. I think it depends. For people like my generation, we study English since very like 10 years old, and especially in nowadays, lots of people can speak English. For my parents' gender, they probably can speak English.
外国人过来，有的人中文也不好，真正有学问的、对中国有研究的，他也不会说这些话。
中国人看起来都很物质，您同意吗？我觉得物质的人哪里都有，不是中国人而已。
这个我看全球人都差不多吧，没有人不喜欢那个物质的条件。我觉得物质也是必须的。我看外国人也挺物质啊。
这个东西呢，要看什么朝代。老毛那个时期，人物质都是精神化，那么市场化以后呢，就是因为你这个钱啊，什么东西都要掏钱买的，你没有钱，你今天可能就是睡马路，那么他没办法，就是整个社会环境逼着你要去赚钱。
那有什么是我们能做的去减少这些国外对中国的错误印象？
我说实话，我都没想过要改变这个逻辑，我觉得自然主义。
我觉得可能是在年轻这一代多多加强教育，然后多多跟国际接轨，可能这样的现象会越来越少。您希望外国友人对中国能有什么样的理解？
其实中国的新一代，我觉得还是蛮好的，而且就是很努力啊，然后也很积极啊，面对生活。我觉得他们应该了解这一点。然后，而且中国现在经济不错嘛，确实因为是发展的很好，后面可以过来中国了解一下，就是蛮好的。
希望他们知道我们其实还是一个以和为贵的国家，还是很欢迎大家，而且我们也都是很热情、很友善的。
我觉得对于作为一个中国人来说，我自己都没有办法了解到我们56个民族和这么多的上下5000年的文化。我觉得，如果国外的朋友稍微对中国有些兴趣，建议他们自己来真正的多学习、多了解一下，而不是听舆论很片面的报道。
What did you guys think of their answers? We hope this video gave you a glimpse into how some Chinese people think. If you enjoyed today's questions and answers, keep an eye on the community tab of our YouTube channel. It's how we try to get you.
Those were some stereotypes that people have of China and Chinese people, and we saw their reactions and their opinions on it, what they think. And remember that even though it's a stereotype, there is some truth to what they're saying. It's only that the truth does not apply to everyone. So they should not define you. You should not try to be what people expect. You should be yourself. So we're doing a Kahoot. So please take out your cell phone, and we're using this tool to do a short review on stereotypes. Okay, this is the game pin. Please log into the site. Enter the pin. We're waiting for everyone to join. Then we're going to begin. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to begin. We have 20 seconds to respond to each question. The first one, what does it mean to stereotype? What does it mean? Does it mean that you treat everyone equally? You treat everyone differently? You judge all people because of one person, or do they all mean stereotype? Lock in your answer. Oh, yeah. So this is what it means to stereotype. When you judge all people based on what you know about one person from the group, then that is a stereotype. everyone differently, you're not stereotyping them. Okay, so John and okay, the next question is true or false? Even Taiwanese have stereotypes against each other. Taiwanese people stereotype each other. It is true. Right? What is a common stereotype about Caucasians? What's a common stereotype that people have about Caucasians? They are adventurous, they're responsible, they're rich, they're always involved. Which one of those is the most common stereotype? Everyone got this one correct. They're adventurous, they're rich, they're always involved. Is there some common stereotypes? Another true or false? This protest began because Black people were always being negatively stereotyped. So it started the Black Lives Matter movement because Black people were always being negatively stereotyped. That is able to just us next question. Which stereotype caused Asians to be attacked worldwide? And they had to start the Stop Asian Hate campaign. Is it because Asians were like Asians were responsible for COVID-19? That was the stereotype that caused people across the world to stereotype Asians and start attacking them. Where do we learn about stereotypes? Where do we learn about stereotypes? Yes, okay, so from all of these places, we learn from the media, we learn from school, we learn from books, we learn from friends and family about stereotypes. Which stereotype is being challenged in this picture? Is it a gender stereotype, racial, political, religious? Which stereotype is being challenged? Only girls should wear pink is not bad. It was wearing full pink. This is the last question, and it's true or false. When you judge people for who they are as a person is a stereotype. Is it true or false? When you judge people who they are as a person or as an individual, you use these stereotypes. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about stereotypes? Anything to add? Are there any questions about stereotypes? If there's no questions, that's the end. Thank you for paying attention and participating.
Thank you, teacher Aisha. Okay, so throughout next week, we are going to prepare for presentation of stereotypes. Okay, so next week, we are going back to this classroom to prepare for your presentation with the notebooks. Okay, thank you very much.